Hi, my name is Victoria. I work at Befriending Networks, and this was a presentation during our National Conference on Wednesday, the 1st of November 2023. So, at this event, our participants were placed into breakout rooms to discuss two discussion points. And the first one was, what challenges do you face when accessing and signposting our longer serving volunteers? So those that have served for 1 year plus, and how can we overcome this? So we raised this discussion point with you all, as is often raised by our members. How do you keep long-serving volunteers engaged? There can be many balancing acts when working within the community. For example, as a project, you want to encourage befrienders to be reliable while maintaining boundaries so to not create dependency. In this scenario, we want to balance being accountable and maintaining communication with our volunteers without drowning them with information. So how do we do it? How do we find the balance of frequency and quality of communication with volunteers without overwhelming them or leaving them in the dark? Firstly, we want to be aware of who your volunteers are. For communication to be effective, we need to understand who we are trying to communicate with. For example, our conference today was attended by our members ranging from positions such as volunteer coordinator up to senior management, ranging from brand new starts to those in long established roles. And for this reason, throughout our presentations, we're covering the basics and building on them in an attempt to cater to our whole audience and not leave anyone behind. So how do we apply this logic to our volunteers? One way you could better your communication is to avoid any jargon or slang or acronyms and embed explanation instead. Leave nothing to chance. So for encouraging our volunteers to attend their meetings with staff, here's an example of assumption versus embedded explanation. In assumption, we send a message that says, it is time for our support and supervision meeting. When are you available? Now, if I'm the volunteer, I have a lot of questions. What do you want from me? Do I need to be available in person? Do I need to free up an afternoon? This may be inefficient for the project, but now as a volunteer, I'm resenting the fact that I need to contact you to clarify, to ask questions and work from there. This resentment may be maximized if I'm also juggling work, my well-being, hobbies, or dependents, for example. So here's an example of embedded explanation. As you know, we require a one-to-one with all volunteers once every 3 months to guarantee we are accountable for our project. Offering a safe and competent service in the community. It is time to arrange your meeting. On average, this meeting runs for 1 hour maximum and can be arranged for occurring in person or online. So it may take you longer to type out the embedded explanation, but it will be more efficient in the long run at getting a result. It can anchor the importance of the volunteer replying and attending, and can help retain a volunteer's engagement by clarifying that you value their time. At Penn State University, a study declared that communication and staying in touch with your volunteers is one of the most important elements of the relationship that is formed between your nonprofit and the volunteers who serve it. So what communication methods work? We are constantly reviewing the impact of our communications. You'll find in most of our evaluation forms, we ask you, where did you hear about this event? We ask for a reason. We're a small team and we need to know how to best apply our energy. Within our network, we have a range of team sizes. Some of our membership are running everything solo, and some may even have several colleagues for support. Whichever your dynamic as an organization, statistically, third sector positions are dominated by part-time roles. So you need to pick communication channels that can be monitored and can be efficient to your capacity. At Befriending Networks, you may be aware that we have newsletters, social media, our website, emails, and bulletins at certain events. For example, I send an email once a quarter to inform all members of the next quarter of training and events that are happening at Befriending Networks. Now, this always leads to a flurry in growth in bookings and income and tells me that it is worth my time putting it together. It's worth my energy, it's efficient, and it's effective. We monitor, we evaluate, and we calculate what works well and what is worth our staff time within tight capacity, and we adapt what doesn't work. Are you doing the same with your volunteers? Are you engaging them with your information, or is it just going into the abyss? There are lots of different communication channels you can choose from. Social media can be great for general updates. The fact platforms are free also has a big win for the third sector. Just ensure to use the insights feature and track what works. Track the impact and find out the content that your audience likes or wants. For example, we know from our insights that social media posts with a visual are more likely to gain clicks or engagement. There's also newsletters. Where possible, use a service that provides statistics. Allow yourself the opportunity to review the effectiveness, the growth, and the return from newsletters. If you are sending bulletins from your email, you may not have the ability to do this. But when sending individual communication to volunteers, emails can be great as you can ensure it is personal. Yes, we may cut and paste sections or use a template, but ensure you build rapport and be personable. A recent study showed that placing the recipient's name in the subject line increased the odds of the email being open. So do think creatively. There's also automatic arrangements. Scheduling platforms can show your availability, creating connections without the back and forth, and minimize a sense of resentment to a meeting. I use Calendly a lot for scheduling one-to-ones. So for example, please follow my link to Calendly, where you can see my availability for meetings next week. Just book the time and date that suits you best, and I'll see you then. There are also phone calls, perhaps the most time-consuming method of all. However, you can build rapport and make it clear with your tone, pitch, and style that you're eager to see your volunteer as you care about them and their well-being, as well as the service reputation and delivery. So what do your volunteers want or need? Why not ask volunteers what method they are likely to respond to quickly? If you are handling dozens of befriending matches, this may be impossible to manage. However, you could categorize people on your communication records to support this. So do remember, with technology poverty, technology inability, language barriers, and accessibility barriers, for inclusion, you want to ensure there are at least two methods available. One size does not fit all. To keep long-standing volunteers engaged, it helps to normalize support from day one. So set clear guidance and expectations from day dot. Clarify the importance of volunteers maintaining or responding to communication from staff as soon as a potential volunteer approaches. There are so many opportunities to make it clear that our support and supervisions, these one-to-one information exchanging meetings, are not optional. There's also the volunteer application forms. So availability for befriending is commonly asked for. A diagram of Monday to Sunday, like this on the screen, but are we clarifying they also need to be available for support and supervisions? Add a checkbox to your application form as shown on the screen. If successful with this application, I agree to attend one-to-one meetings with staff quarterly. Set the expectations and show the requirement for the role. There's also the volunteer interview, where we have dedicated focus of conversation to ensure the topic of support is covered. Embed the explanation throughout the interview that volunteers may be lone working without direct supervision in the community, but that does not mean that they are alone. Clarify your support structure. Re-establish and embed the support available during the volunteer training, during your post-training interview, and your volunteer handbook. Ensure there is no chance that a volunteer misunderstands the importance of staff being aware of the intricacies of the relationship, the well-being of the volunteer, and their match. These are also great opportunities for clarifying your focus on ensuring volunteers are not in any way exploited. We recommend looking to Volunteer Scotland's Volunteer Charter for some great insight on this and 10 key principles that you could incorporate into your project. Another way to improve volunteer engagement is to provide and receive feedback and make a volunteer feel valued, heard, and part of the project. Ensure that the volunteer is getting something out of this meeting. Make sure to provide feedback and to listen to their feedback. A support and supervision should cover a range of things, and feedback should be consistent. On the screen is just an example of a support and supervision agenda, and as you'll see, those marked in green, 5 out of 11 of my agenda topics are based around feedback, almost 50%. All of this can help to embed the volunteer pathway and ensure that the support available as optional and the support that is mandatory is clear. Repetition of information can support engagement, even for our long-standing volunteers. So ensure to embed the purpose and importance of maintaining engagement and communication in your day-to-day operations. Make volunteers feel valued, and hopefully this will encourage retainment. The second discussion point in this segment was, is there a capacity on matches for providing safe and competent support to volunteers within our contracted hours? So to understand the capacity of the project, let's backtrack. Why do you exist? What is the goal of your project? How long does it take to achieve? How do we know when a match has been successful? To be accountable to our funders and our stakeholders, key performance indicators can assist us to identify our successes, our strengths, and areas for development. One debate we often find our network having is the discussion of matches, either as match capacity or match duration. So how many matches are too many matches? I think the question is missing one key part. What kind of matches are we talking about? Our time dedication for a match can vary whether it's face-to-face or distance, but let's focus on our topic of new volunteers versus those long-standing volunteers. On the screen, you can see a list of things that I thought of off the top of my head as responsibilities with a new match, ranging from checking the references, disclosure, acceptance if required for the role, induction, training, the matching process, and so on. Now, here is my list for responsibilities with an established match. Again, only examples and what first came to mind. Whether old or new matches, ideally the level of support or access to support stays balanced so our long-serving volunteers do not feel neglected or abandoned after the high engagement of when they first started. But as you can see, matches are not generic. We are working with people, they are unique, individual, and respectively cannot be stereotyped into a little box. Every match can vary on time, but here is what shouldn't vary in your project: the objective. Consider the objective of your organization. How much time does it take to achieve that objective? What do we ask from our volunteers? Is it 6 months or longer, a year, 2 years? Should befriending matches be open-ended or time limited? It is a discussion we constantly have. So here on the screen are some pros. I'll give you all this information. You can decide for yourself. But for example, in positivity of time limited matches, we have things such as the volunteers have got clear expectations. So if it's a 6-month befriending match, I know that I'm volunteering for 6 months and then we'll see what happens. It also provides a focus of time to develop social skills and confidence of the service user. I have a goal as a volunteer to provide companionship or to build social confidence of someone else. Having that time can keep a structure and keep the goals in focus. Importantly, also, the volunteer coordinator or other staff member can sorry can have an ever-growing capacity is when one match time frame ends, the volunteer is given the option to start a new match, reducing recruitment time. So in terms of open-ended, we can look at the fact that the quality of matches is more important than the number of matches, or staff do not feel the same pressure to get results from their matches. The relationship between the volunteer and service user can be more meaningful. These are just the positives that came to mind for me initially. Clearly, you can see my brain has picked a side, but do consider what is best for you and your project. I've supported many projects with their volunteer training over the years. And when I run a bespoke training consultancy, I talk through what a project wants or needs in their volunteer training. The top requests are communication styles, how to build a relationship and trust, and how to embed and maintain boundaries. All important topics, but what is often not requested is endings. Now, endings are a key part of the volunteer pathway, a crucial part, and can be key to managing our capacity, yet often excluded from volunteer training. And I have my theories on why this is. It can seem a little negative. Also, for some of you, you might be like, we only just got our volunteers in the door. Why are we rushing them back out? But also, it could be about priorities. You need to make priorities when you think about your volunteer training agenda. And you might want to be keeping it at a certain length so that the training itself does not seem unattractive. So you want to cover the basics that get the volunteers started. But here is the danger. Commonly, befriending projects are supporting vulnerable groups in the community. Could be a minor, could be someone housebound alone, could be one of the million variables in between. So guess what our befriendees don't need? An abrupt ending. Make it clear that there are multiple ways to disengage with the project. For example, on the screen, option 1, a volunteer gives their notice period and the match is given framework and support to end on a positive note without undoing any progress made via befriending. Knowing the options for disengagement can help to ensure that a volunteer follows ending's procedure so that a service user or a project are not abandoned without notice. This assists with our duty of care to run a safe and competent service to protect the well-being of those involved. Clarifying all of this during volunteer training can reduce the guilt a volunteer may feel when they leave. It can help to normalize the topic of endings, and it can encourage open and transparent conversations about saying goodbye. And as a result, we can make endings more manageable for those using the service. Just make sure to collect data on why the volunteer wants to disengage. Their opinion can be invaluable and could help highlight necessary or recommended changes required in your volunteer experience. And this feedback could help you retain more volunteers in the long run. So in summary, to support longer serving volunteers and to give safe and competent support to matches, please remember, be aware of who your volunteers are, embed explanation in your communication, and choose your communication channels wisely. Normalize support from day one and be open to receiving feedback as well as providing it. Consider match capacity and duration and be transparent with your endings. If you would like to know more about anything mentioned in this video, all the content was pulled from this variety of training courses. I'm happy to answer any questions, so just get in contact, victoria@befriending.co.uk.